Good evening. I'm Renee Garrity, and I'm your host tonight, along with my co-host, Majda Gama. In a few moments, we'll enjoy the readings of Kimiko Hahn and Sharon Suzuki Martinez. If there's enough time after the readings, Karen Alanier will moderate a short question and answer period. I recognize many of you tonight, and it's good to see you again. Welcome back. For those of you who are here for the first time, you'll notice your microphones are muted. This keeps the inevitable dog barks and doorbells from interrupting our readers. Sometimes the internet chooses its own path, and so please bear with you if there's a glitch, a technical glitch. If you have difficulty hearing the reading, there's a gray box at the bottom of the screen level labeled CC. Click on the gray box and choose Show Subtitles. That will give you an in-time reading of the poetry. Now, poets work for love, not money. There's no salary, vacation, or 401k, so we've put in a link in the chat to encourage you to buy our poets' books. We've also put in a link to donate to Café Muse. We're all volunteer, and so hopefully that you will check out our link. Now I have the honor of introducing Kimiko Hahn. Kimiko is a distinguished professor and assistant director in the MFA Creative Writing and Literary Translation program at Queens College in New York. She was the judge for the WordWorks 2016 Hilary Tam Capital Collection. And on behalf of WordWorks, we're glad to have you join us again. Kimiko has received numerous honors, which include the Guggenheim Fellowship, the Penn Volker Award, the Association of Asian American Studies Literature Award, and the Theodore Roethke Memorial Poetry Prize. In her essay at the end of her book, Foreign Bodies, More on Japanese Poetics, Kimiko discusses the influence of Japanese poetics on her poetry, her use of words with more than one meaning, word associations, and wordplay, and the repetition of words and the repetition of lines throughout her poems. Her words tumble into the poem. The forms are hers. It could be a quatrain combined with couplets, couplets followed by a single line, followed by a narrative, or maybe 5 words that hang at various points on a page in seemingly random manner. Her 10th book, Foreign Bodies, was inspired by let me see if I can get this straight, laryngologist Dr. Chevalier Jackson, who collected over 2,300 objects, or foreign bodies, if you will, that his patients had swallowed. The objects were safety pins, charms, medals, buttons, and even jacks. The story behind these objects were not important to Dr. Jackson, only the process of extraction and the collection of every object. Contrary to his lack of interest, Kimiko uses objects large and small to tell her story, her family stories, the car accident that killed her mother while her father was driving, her father's hoarding. In the book's first poem, Unearthly Delights, begins her father's story of hoarding through objects she finds in his bedroom after his death. A pile of art supply catalogs, brown scraps of bedspread, cotton batting, a rodent body, rodent turds. It tells us there's something that's not quite right. His room resurfaces in her poem Object Lessons and continues his story. Cartons of bleach and cans of stew blocked the door to the basement, and the mahogany bedroom set was surrounded by trash bags of mother's clothing that they had tagged years ago for the Salvation Army. In her poem Dusting, it shows her use of wordplay. Her mother's ashes become the object that brings her mother back to her in a philosophical way. When she says, wherever mother is bound, she's joined ashes, ashes or dirt underfoot or bits off Tower North and Tower South. Repurposed does not arrive whole cloth. From stardust to dust bunnies, dust bowl, and dust to dust. With that, please welcome Kimiko Hahn.
Thank you so much. I should, at this point, hold up my book so you can see some of the actual objects that Dr. Shivaya Quixote Jackson hoarded from all the objects he took out of children's bodies. So thank you, Renee. I have to apologize because I'm the one with my mute off and my terrier in the other room barking. So I apologize. Thank you, Renee and Ellen and Henry and Maja and Leah, of course, Karen, and also my co-reader, Sharon. As Renee said, in Foreign Bodies, I explore, in a long poem, I explore the life and objects that Dr. Jackson, who's a laryngologist, extracted from children's bodies. You can see all 2,000 plus at the Mutter Museum in drawers, but I also explore other meanings of that phrase, which you will hear. Boy, she's angry with me, my terrier. In writing about my father's house and also belongings, his hoarding, I decided to write from the house's point of view. The area was originally farmland and the foundation of our house, a chicken coop. This poem is in 4 parts, each taking a different time period. The old house speaks. Before I became foundation, I was a chicken coop, a ways from farmhouse, carriage house, and barn, and around my grounds, someone's daughter played with her bisque baby among stink and chicken feathers, eggshells, nests. I tasted the haze of dandruff and chicken shit, the taste of my own throat. From my planks and wire, I heard the clucks, the coos, the rat-a-tat-tat as the scabby rooster pecked like the sun's paddle toy. I wasn't so much humble as meager. There is nowhere for anywhere except a runaway who needs the dank, dark, soiled straw. The farmer's little girl played with the chipped teacups alongside the buzzing chicken scraps, all converted finally into a trash heap. Noisy and noisome, from that rough roost to an indoor out, branch and ice rip me open, birds tear into my screens, leave droppings all over my insides. Did I say a runaway? More recently, down the hill in one family's garage, the wife turned the car on and fell asleep to the smell of gas, shutting the door to the other neighbors, rat-a-tat-tat. The male raccoon leaves shitty paw prints on the grocery circulars and coupons that flood the floorboards, even on watercolors left out on a desk. There is nowhere where there is no scat. After winter torpor, I wince when the raccoon births her kits in a closet. Some say a raccoon makes over 200 sounds, and it's true. I've counted as many. And the mask reduces glare at night. And the ringed tail stores fat for the winter and aids in any balancing act. and the dousing of food. Yes, wash. Funny how the pregnant female kicks out the male. Yes, where creatures thrive, I cannot breathe. What will become of my kitchen? The room where the now middle-aged woman, when a toddler, sat in the bright porcelain sink for a sponge bath. One of the few events that she cares to recall while sifting through the rubbish. Once her mother's home, her father's house, or was it the inverse? I no longer belong to a church, house of worship, or a religion. And in thinking about what happens after death, I feel comforted that my body will become nothing, as my mother's body is nothing. Renee spoke a little bit about the poem A Dusting, and I'm going to read that next. My husband tells me that it makes no sense, that I feel comforted that I'll become nothing like my mother, but somehow it makes me comforted. This poem is a string of sections, each exploring different kinds of dust. A dusting. However, mother has reappeared, say as motes on a feather duster, scientists say the galaxy was created thus. This daybreak, she seeds a cumulus cloud. Wherever mother is bound, she's joined ashes, ashes, or dirt underfoot, or bits off Tower North and Tower South. Repurpose does not arrive whole cloth. From stardust, dust bunnies, dust bowl, dust unto dust, Whitman's boot soles in his leaves of grass, and Dunbar's, what of his love, what of his lust, to samples that astronomers collect. Dust is where the sparrow bathes herself. Not a cloud in the sky, mother says as she hangs the laundry outside. Father paints en plein air, and we girls sweep crumbs under the rug. This summer, father sees inferno everywhere. No dust-ups from little girls. As a consequence, one scribbled on the dustbins of history, and the other dusted for fingerprints. And the mother lived in a vacuum. Inside the senseless corridors, the daughter cannot respire. Inside the vulgar cosmic, the mother cannot be revived in steaming wet traffic. Nowadays, I lie down in the sunlight to see my mama moting around as sympathetic ash. Yes, one morning, whether misty or yellow, I'll be soot with her, elegiac and original. With all these Zoom readings, someone said, well, you're just going to have to curate your own sounds, own background sounds. And so I guess that's what I'm ending up doing, the terrier and fire whistle and some birds. So that's part of what's going on here, folks. I'm going to read the title poem, Foreign Body. And this is explores a little bit the immigrant body and my mother's body. Foreign Body. This is a poem on my other's body. I mean, my mother's body. I mean the one who saved her braid of blue-black hair in a drawer. I mean the one I could lean against as in insistence. Fuzzy dress of wuzzy one, red lipstick one, rubber gloves one, her one to me, bad jur, or so I heard. The one body I write on, her sun-flecked body as she bathed in the afternoon. Was I 5? It was summer. Then winter, where today I call the unlocked bathroom to mind. I cannot leave her body alone, which is how I found mother escaping the heat of a 1950s house, father on a ladder with blowtorch to scrape the paint off the outside. Badger, badger. The sun in those suburbs simmered the tar roof over our rooms in the town where the wasps lived, inside paper cells, beneath eaves and roots. They sing, I mean, sting very much, the wasps. Now I'm 60, sweet as dried papaya, my hair a bit tarnished, my inmost null. Memory is falling away, as if an image shattered to shards, then recollected for a kaleidoscope. I click the pieces into sharp arrangement. Bad, bad, girl, girl. In turn, a daughter turns sovereign. Another poem on the immigrant body. This one was prompted from a newspaper article during the time when Trump was aggressively shutting the border to those trying to cross the border from South and Central America. I like assignments. I love giving myself writing prompts. So this one came from a dinner conversation where another poet asked if I ever write occasional poems written for occasions. A daughter, after being asked if I write the occasional poem. After leaving Roxruja, after crossing Mexico with a coyote, after reaching at midnight that barren New Mexico border, a man and his daughter looked to Antelope Wells for asylum and were arrested. After forms read in Spanish to the Mayan-speaking father, after a cookie but no water, after the wait for the lone bus to return for their turn, after boarding, after the little girl's temperature spiked, she suffered 2 heart attacks, vomited, and stopped breathing. After medics revived the 7-year-old at Lordsburg Station, after she was flown to El Paso where she died, the coroner examined the failed liver and swollen brain. Then Jacqueline's chest and head were stitched up and she was returned to Guatemala in a short white coffin to her mother, grandparents, and dozens of women preparing tamales and beans to feed the grieving. In Quechua, W-E means mouth. Many of my poems are prompted by outside material, especially news articles like the one I just read. Several years ago, I read a beautifully written essay on ghost forests. That's marshland that becomes invaded by rising ocean tides due to climate change. So the trees in freshwater marshes soon die because of the salt water. And it leaves behind a forest of dead trees, hence ghost forest. I wrote 2 poems. One is an erasure. So I took the article and I just white outed all the words that I didn't want and left a ghost of the article to create this poem. Erasing the ghost forest. Erase my terrier. Erasing the ghost forest. The young predict intensified spells and the synergy of fire and salt. Just a few evoke graveyards. Sawgrass and black needle rush were a clue to where fires travel on top of standing water. If you're lucky, velvety tufts of cordgrass sprout into alligator or princess. The menaces are an invisible flood. Gedden has learned to read forests. Gedden has learned to read saltwater. Gedden has learned to read marsh. More intense spells conjure the migrating marsh as a window into the rest of the world. I've been increasingly in the past 3-5 years writing formal poems. They don't always stay in the original form. Sometimes I alter them. So there is a kind of ghost, if you will, of the original form. So this is another poem on the ghost forest. It originally started as a sestina with the repeating words pine, sea, salt, pine, sea, salt, long, root, and stand. So you'll hear those words here and there. The ghost forest. Neighbors call the stands of pine a ghost forest because when glaciers melt, the sea steals onto the land, the salt seeps in, and long established marshes, once fresh, now salt, seize from bleach and blacken at the roots. True, grubby shrubs, grasses, stands of sweet gum and loblolly pine are less susceptible to the long visiting floods that now belong to those insinuating sea waters. True, the stranger sea and swindler saltwater are lodgers that coax their salt tenderly into the tendrils that have rooted one to home until one is rooted out. True, the residents have lived long through the come-ons, not just the flashes of seizure, nor a familiar's bolt. Look, after a drought, after the salt waters move in without being seen, everything turns to a moldering spine so that now anyone who remains in a cul-de-sac longs to drive off. But on one route, when in the rear view, the dying stand where once the homestead stood. This afternoon, ruin takes root in the threshold. Futures are salted away in family cemeteries. Tell me, what belongs here more than these morbid pine roots? How to see that these roots can withstand the water from long rains, but not the sea. Spring tidings are not from pine saplings, but assault. I think I have time for one more poem. I'm going to read another poem that was inspired, prompted by New York Times article. My collection, Toxic Flora, is a collection where almost all the poems were prompted by articles in the science section of the New York Times. And I noticed that Sharon has a poem to a very particular whale, and this is my poem to the same whale. Ode to 52 Hertz. While monitoring enemy subs in the Pacific, hydrophones classified a distinct basso profundo frequency, calling with a metronome's regularity as belonging to a whale species unknown. For 12 years, he's been calling out to no response. And now, Mary Ann Daher, the pioneer in marine mammal acoustics, who spent years eavesdropping on the largely hidden lives of whales, has died. So who will listen to 52 Hertz, to what scientists suggest is either a hybrid, great blue and fin, or malformed, or, as my husband, who has only studied Melville, suggests is a mutant. Me, I first responded to a Japanese American, but we divorced because it doesn't always work out according to kind. Though I miss saying to my first mother-in-law, Tadaima, I'm home, a frequency I cannot return to. Of course, I'm being a romantic, thinking the whale cared, that it knew, that it cried out to a human since no others listened, that it knew no others listened or feared as much, that we think so and can bear sentimentality, that we listen for such opportunities with frequency. Thank you very much.
Well, now it is my pleasure, absolute pleasure, thank you, Kimiko, to introduce Sharon Suzuki Martinez to Café Muse. Reading from her book, The Loneliest Whale Blues. The Loneliest Whale Blues is a book of both form and hybrid form. It is direct and self-deprecating, humorous and tragic. For a book released in the midst of a global pandemic, it is presciently aware of where we are as a country and as a century. It is a book that resonated deeply with me, containing many memoir-like haibun that address memory, ancestry, and migration using the language of the quotidian. In the haibun, Bird Seer, Sharon takes on the conundrum of the social media platform Twitter, a medium full of propaganda and disinformation, by looking back to the ancient Roman practice of augury, a method of divining the future by observing the flight path of birds. The haiku that seals the poem reads, "Count yourself lucky. When uneasiness sets in, you are full of birds." This is a book of embodiment, a book full of Okinawan ancestors, the Hawaiian landscape, and ancestors in the animal and plant worlds. That all life is interconnected isn't a hypothetical. We are with the entire world here, with the whales, the hummingbirds, snails, dandelions, and capybaras. Myth and magic are not ancient or old world, but evolving still. In the final poem, The Breakfast of Epiphanies, the goddess Amaterasu emerges from her cave into a morning air scented with fresh-baked cinnamon rolls. In a world presently suffering from the effects of centuries of self-harm, this book is truly a balm. The present is a tough place, but in Suzuki Martinez's hand, it is also luminous. To quote from her poem, Perhaps Capybaras, this book is a star quilt you didn't know you needed because of all those nights in the cold. Sharon Suzuki Martinez won the 2021 Washington Prize from the WordWorks for her book, The Loneliest Whale Blues. Her first book, The Way of All Flux, won the 2010 MVP Prize from New Rivers Press. She also has a micro chapbook from Rinky Dink Press titled A Glimpse of Birds Over Oadam Land. Sorry for the mispronunciation there. She is a Kundimon Fellow, Pushcart nominee, and a Best of the Net 2018 finalist. She grew up in Hawaii and now lives in Tempe, Arizona. Please welcome Sharon to Café Muse.
Thank you, Marsha. And thank you, Karen, for inviting me, and Renee and Henry for putting this together. And thank you so much to Kimiko. It's a real honor to read with you. And I'm really happy that we also feel for the loneliest whale, or 52. I'll be reading from my new book, right here, that just got launched last Wednesday, in fact. And the book covers lives of creatures big and small, but also my own life. And that began in Hawaii and is now in Tempe, Arizona, on the traditional homeland of the Akima'aw, previously called the Pima. I wrote my first poem of the night after finding out that my hometown used to be inside of a volcano. It made me wonder about how the past haunts the present and how the present is already haunting the future. And I'm also interested in ghosts, anything ghost worlds. My hometown in Hawaii lies inside a half-collapsed crater. I lived in a ghost of a volcano, but I didn't know. I heard places hold echoes of all that has occurred within them. Ghosts of your former lives still haunt your old apartments. Roads remember, schools remember, battlefields remember. Lava and the blood of 800 fallen warriors flowed through my childhood. I learned about Hawaiian history and how the islands were formed, but my head remained hollow. I could not fathom how the past is the earth's unseen molten mantle, shaping the topography of the present. My new home in Arizona was once a Paleozoic seabed and a fruitful desert garden, thriving with the ancestors of people and beings very alive today. I live in a ghost ocean now, but this time I know. My next poem is about me and my husband's first year together in the small town of Casa Grande, Arizona. We encountered what purported to be a whale in a shopping center parking lot. This poem's called The Dead Whale Traveling Circus. Part 1. She looked at the sky. It had no clouds or drones or gods. It was empty. She stared into a grasshopper's eyes. At first, only her own moon face reflected back. It was empty. But in the depths between the atoms, it was also empty. All the space thrilled her to delight. Part 2. The couple remembered the dead whale traveling circus. For $5, you could eyeball little Arby floating in a trailer. A whale fetus, like disintegrating sandwich meat, is really sad entertainment. But for them, the whale is a constellation drifting across the womb cosmos of memory. Part 3. Every night he leaves his glass unwashed in the sink, as if to say, mañana. She, the pessimist, doesn't assume in the existence of mañanas. But sometimes within the panorama of space, she sees tomorrow looking back without eyes, with a twinkle. My next poem is for my family. There's a belief on my dad's side of the family, who came from Fukushima, Japan, that, excuse me, that our ancestors visit us in the form of giant grasshoppers. And giant grasshoppers have visited me all my life. So it's very comforting, but kind of eerie too. This is called The Wall Looking West. Each time someone dies in my family, a wall falls away from me. The first wall crumbled when my mom's heart stopped in an airport far from home. She was my North Star and a wall of stone. My brother, my east wall, my bulletproof glass wall was shattered by marauding tumors. And my father, my south wall of earth, slowly eroded away for lack of appetite. And when he was gone, the roof collapsed to the ground, and I was the last wall standing. In the family house of myself, I am the wall facing each setting sun, the wall with the door always open to the land of the dead, the one woven of flowers visited by ancestors in the shape of grasshoppers as large as children's hands. The next poem is about scapegoating. And one of the most insidious things about scapegoating, I find, is how prejudice hurts people who are innocent, but distracts you from people who are most likely to want to cause you great harm. This is Menace with 1,000 Faces. Before 9/11, we set off red flags for airport security. We always got double searched while being told it was a completely random selection. What a remarkably consistent coincidence. My husband is Pima, like the World War II hero Ira Hayes, and a professor. He is dignified and quiet with a backpack of books. Security found this alarming. Maybe they were hoping for Geronimo. I am the sinister sister of Mr. Miyagi. The security insinuated my silver jewelry could be used as throwing stars, or my umbrella was half a nunchaku. Nobody else was accused of being a ninja. Since when have Native and Asian American couples ever posed a threat to the flying public? We got caught in the great white net of free-floating anxieties. Everyone is a potential villain in a country of fear. After 9/11, we stopped getting harassed at airports. Our faces didn't match the latest enemies. We were yesterday's scapegoats, free to go for now. My next one is about the power of dreams. And I think dreams form the foundation of the world as well as your own life. Dreamers. I cast my mind into the sea of sleep from dawn's dim shore. Never got a nibble. My dreams flicked their slippery tails before diving blind down into the deep. My mother sleptwalked as a child. She often awoke among banana trees on her family's farm. I'm a scary sleeper too. I shout my house awake with nightmares. I'm sorry, David. Dreamers came under attack in America. Children who are guilty of nothing except for the dreams and earth-toned skin of their parents. Imagine we live inside the dreams of a God. When we awaken, will we vanish like a rainbow or shift our shapes and colors like cuttlefish? I found a key, but you hide the door. You are the maze and I am a minotaur. We are the dream in search of the dreamer. My next poem is an appreciation of the ant, and I like all bugs, and I think I inherited it from my mom. She wasn't afraid of bugs. She called some bugs her pets. Ant as talisman. Ant is a tiny word, straightforward like the insects themselves. Although ant looks minuscule and lonely on paper, the central letter N is equivalent to saying and, as if to remind you of the reservoirs of ants not far underground, embodying the magic to call forth multitudes like black water from stone. Ant is the writer's talisman against the horror of the blank page. Fun fact, the ant is not easily crushed. It can bear disappointments 50 times the size of its ego. A young winged ant, queen ant, lands on my glasses. I wonder why she chose my point of view to locate an auspicious spot for her colony, her dynasty, her corporate empire. No. She's looking for somewhere to start her story, her collection, her eloquent revolution. And this is what I choose to believe. The next one is a haibu, one of my favorite literary forms. And this one's about bugs and their relationship to humans. Phenomenal little monsters. The stick insect, the original minimalist, prefers to keep its intricacies secret. Throughout their 47 million year evolution, stick insects have lost and regrown their wings repeatedly. Like bare branches occasionally sprouting leaves and taking flight. Deep in this bug's genetic code lurks the ability to bring forth winged progeny whenever the environment demands it. Even more impressive is the 600 million year old tardigrade. These pudgy microanimals, also known as water bears, can survive freezing and boiling temperatures in outer space. During drought or worse conditions, they curl up and sleep in suspended animation for decades like interstellar astronauts. They resurrect in a few drops of water. Tardigrades survived 5 great mass extinctions, including the asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs. Imagine if we had such abilities, and imagine we do. Imagine the coronavirus pandemic awakens powers only ever known by our earliest ancestors. Imagine your superpower has slept for generations in your family's genes. The ability to survive famine, to shapeshift into ravens and wolves, to dream away the horrors of doomsday. Children teased for being weird might come back our greatest hope, might become our greatest hope. May forgotten myths come roaring back to life to save us. And this is the haiku. Chaos could trigger one's blood memories to burst into phoenix wings. The next poem was inspired by my paternal grandfather getting bitten by a moray eel. When I was little, my father's family went to Maui, and we went to the same beach every year, every summer, to gather seaweed. And this is how my grandfather got bitten by the moray eel. The beach recollects the crunch. Beside the sea, in a white shell dress, a beach on Maui remembers my family. At low tide, gathering seaweed in the shallows, she recalls a little girl like an urchin in the sand, with her grandma watching the others splash through summer, carrying old cloth rice bags. The beach reflects upon the moray eel that bit my grandpa, his wounding commemorated in a proud photo. The beach recollects about how we would pickle the red branch seaweed in vinegar, shoyu, and sugar to create ogo namasu, a crunchy delicacy. The beach also feels the eel crunching into my grandpa's hand. She tastes the blood fear of fish and man, but also the sweetness of both living to savor the story. The next poem is my title poem, which describes a real whale that's been heard but never seen, and Kimiko has already told you a bit about it. It's my title poem, The Loneliest Whale Blues. Epigraph. All these whales can hear this guy. They're not deaf. He's just odd. Christopher Clark, whale researcher. For over 20 years, he has called out and gone unanswered. The unknown whale with the 52 hertz pitch, a falsetto at a bass conference. To be unique among the Japanese means to be alone. A subarashi freak, a grand outcast, a curious whale wandering the bluest wilderness. Maybe the whale needs space, so deliberately acts repulsive. Maybe he's wailing ancient Styx tunes or screeching out to all, "Konnichiwa, you sick fucks." But possibly the whale sings because of the sun. He watches her swim solitary across the long days. One day she will bring him her white hot rhythm, as all the great soulmates do. And I want to end my reading with my book's closing poem. Majda talked about it a little, but I've never read this before, so here it is. It's called The Breakfast of Epiphanies. You see a light in the distance. The streets still slumber in indigo. There are no other cars as you leave the city limits and zip through miles of forest. At the end of the road, you find a festival lit with thousands of candles, laughter, strange music, and dancing. The fragrance of coffee and cinnamon rolls. Yet all heads are turned towards an immense cave where a dazzling woman slowly emerges, gazing at the revelers. She is the sun, and we are her best mirrors. Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening.
I thank you both for this excellent reading. And there are lots of interesting cross points, I believe. And I think it comes down to this, and that is that it's point of view. Both of you have objects that speak. And it's so interesting to me how that works. And I was wondering if each of you could say something about how you feel, in terms of the object speaking. Kimiko, you had the house that was speaking, and I think there were some other, speakers in your repertoire. And I know that, Sharon, you had many different things speaking the beach, and you also had a house that was speaking in the terms of your being walls in your family. So Kimiko, maybe you could start, and let's see where we go with this.
Okay, yes, it's true. We both have these objects. I guess I've always had that in my poems, the sense of magic, that these objects contain a kind of magic, the talisman, right? But I've been really, I would say, apprenticing myself, so to speak, to Emily Dickinson's poetry. I did that during the pandemic, and her work in particular is, she's like a sorceress, right? Her words just feel like they're levitating. They're not just language. And I just, I wanted to learn how to do that. So some of her influence, thankfully, I think has appeared in foreign bodies.
As for myself, I've always, I guess everywhere around me, I see living things with voices. I mean, particularly animals, but what's considered inanimate objects. And I read somewhere recently that I guess the Japanese consider everything to be alive, and so you can address them, and they'll speak back to you in their own way, and it's nothing that anybody's ever told me, or my parents never told me about this. It's just something I've always lived.
I was thinking that perhaps it could also relate to Zen Buddhism in terms of rocks, having a vibration that can be picked up. I know the monks rake the rocks at dawn, and there seems to be the putting back in order, the cosmos and that raking. So I appreciate the magic of things coming to life, Kimiko. So I think that I didn't want to put any words in anybody's mouth by saying something about what I was thinking was the Zen Buddhist aspect of it. But I unless there is another question in the chat, I haven't seen anything. I'm going to turn this back over to Renee to close this out. This has been a wonderful program of animate things and beings. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank
It
you.
truly has been a wonderful evening. And it's hard to come to the end of the program. It was so enjoyable. But I want to thank our poets, Kimiko and Sharon, for their magical and fascinating poems. It's been a pleasure. Give me a hand for both of you. We encourage you again to go to the links in the chat and purchase their books and donate to Café Muse reading series. Well, as they say, all good things must come to an end. And so it is with the Joaquin Miller reading series and Poets versus the Pandemic. Please join Karen Alanier and the WordWorks this Thursday, June 9th at 7 p.m. to say farewell after 45 years to the Joaquin Miller reading series. It's going to be a wonderful, wonderful reading with featured readers Kathy Haley, Arden Levine, and new WordWorks author Tara Betts. You'll hear poems by the late Jacqueline Potter and, of course, Miller's poem, Columbus. You'll hear a short reading of poems from the anthology Cabin Fever, and there will be a presentation to Jacqueline Potter's 2022 Young Poets Award. That's always amazing. And alas, June 29th at 7 p.m. will be the last Poets versus the Pandemic. It features Ellen Thompson with guest poets Fran Abrams and Aaron Kimura. And Henry, we just have to give you a tremendous thanks for a tremendous amount of work preparing and presenting Poets versus Pandemic that took us through these isolated times. Thank you. If you haven't registered for Poets versus the Pandemic, the link is in the chat. And you're welcome to invite your family and friends, but please don't put it on social media so we can avoid the Zoom bombers. Don't despair. Café Muse reading series is not going anywhere. And we'll be back on July 11th at 7 p.m. featuring Kelly Crescio-Moller and Abby Wender. Finally, I want to thank everyone who made this evening possible, my co-host, Majda Gama, and all of our other co-hosts behind the scene, Ellen Cole, Leah Johnson, Susan Oakey, and of course, Henry and our founder, Karen Alanier. We have an announcement. We have a new member to our Café Muse team. Janice Booth will be joining us next month as a new co-host. Welcome, Janice. Thank you, Michael Davis, for your classical music, and Henry for your technical assistance and photos. And we want to thank all of you for joining us, because without you, we wouldn't be here. So be well, stay safe, and good night.